Alright, the tools that we're going to need for this build, we are going to need a multi-bit screwdriver, and we're also going to need an anti-static wrist strap. The multi-bit screwdriver is probably going to be the only tool you're going to need. However, a pair of pliers may come in handy, however, should be okay. The anti-static wrist strap kind of speaks for itself. We do not want any static from our bodies, clothes moving against them, to help prevent anything unfortunate happening to the electronics while doing the build. So make sure you pick up both of those, and then we are ready to begin. Okay, second thing on the list is our case. The case is essentially the body of the computer. It houses everything that the computer will need to contain and essentially run at the end. The cases come in several different types. The smallest case is called Mini ATX. They are the smallest, normally going from anywhere the size of a lunchbox up to maybe about the size of 14 or so inches. The second size is called mid-tower. Mid-tower cases only go up to about 18 inches. Sometimes you may get them up to about 20. Those are normally the modern cases that you'll see if you were to go into a Best Buy or a Walmart and get a desktop. That's the type of desktop you'll be buying, is a mid-tower case. The case that I'm going to be working with and using as this tutorial is a full tower case. Full tower cases are the biggest, normally 24 inches and higher. The next component is the motherboard. The motherboard is essentially what holds everything else in. The case, as mentioned before, pretty much houses everything. This holds everything. Think of this like the skeleton of the computer. If you notice, there's a lot going on here. The motherboard I'm currently using is an Asus Sabertooth 990FX board. Names really don't mean too much. However, some of them are more equipped for gaming, more of them for casual use. If you'll notice right here, the first thing that you have here, this is the CPU socket. We'll be getting to that later on. Next here, we have the RAM slots. If you notice, there are 4. There is black and there is tan, or gold. That pretty much determines on what kind of RAM you're using. If you're only using 2, you only use 2 colors. If you're using all 4, you would have all 4 set out, then you don't need to worry. You'll notice a bunch of other things like this and here. These are heat sinks. They help spread out the heat that the motherboard pretty much creates. And as moving down here, you'll notice these other kind of slots here. These are called PCIe slots. They are for networking cards, sound cards, and video cards, which I'll also be touching on later on. And if you notice up here, we have this big cluster of things. What those pretty much are these are the peripherals. This is what allows you to connect to the outside world. Going over to the I/O shield, you'll notice we have the audio output, so you can actually go up to 5:1 surround sound. We have the Ethernet and 2 USB slots. We have another 2 USB slots. We have eSATA, which normally we don't really use too much. USB 3.0, a couple more USB slots, and we also have the old school keyboard connections. What goes very good with the motherboard is the CPU. This is essentially the brain of the computer. There are 2 main brands of CPUs that are currently out there. There's Intel, which is most likely in the computer that you're seeing this on, and then there's also AMD, which is what I'm currently using. There are not too many differences between the two, aside from how they go about sending information and processing information, hence the term processor. The processor that I'm using is called an AMD FX 8350. The name is very important with these because depending on which one you get will determine on the cores and what you're going to be getting. Normally the more expensive they are, the better the processor, so it is priced to what you're going to be paying. My processor currently has 8 cores and they're running at 4 gigahertz, which is essentially called the clock speed. The higher the clock speed, the faster the process will run. The next component of our build is the video card or GPU. Video cards are extremely diverse, essentially like how people are. Many companies make them, and there's definitely different kinds of models that are available. The 2 main ones that you normally will get are NVIDIA and AMD. And of course you'll have the fanboys of one and the fanboys of the other. Regardless, they both do the exact same thing. They're essentially the eyes, what allows you to see, and it also sends video to your monitors. Looking on the side here, as you can see, there are only a couple components to actually be able to plug into. We have a DVI, HDMI, and 2 DisplayPort settings. Depending on your monitor, you may require one of these, or if you have 2 monitors, which is what I'm running, you'll actually be using 2 of them. Like the video card, these come in many different brands as well. The average that you would normally see in any computer now is a minimum of 4 gigabytes. However, the one I'm running right now is I have 2 4-gigabyte sticks. So I have 8 gigabytes of RAM. The more RAM that you have means the more stuff you can have open. RAM stands for Random Access Memory. The more RAM you have, the more things you can have open. So the next component on our list is the power supply. This is essentially the heart. This is what gives everything purpose and power and allows everything to work. The power supply comes in many different brands as well. The one I'm currently using here is a Corsair HX850. The HX is just the type and model of it. 850 is watts. So this is an 850 watt power supply. Now you're going to have to plan accordingly when you are building your computer, because a lot of components require a different amount of wattage, and you don't want to have too little wattage to go to it, or else your computer will do something called blue screening and turn off. The power supplies come in different types. They come in modular, which is pretty much the components allow you to pretty much plug in exactly what you need when you need it. Semi-modular, which is what this is, it has things already plugged in and routed and wired, while being able to plug and play pretty much what you need at any given time. And then we have normal power supplies, which won't have any of these little plugs there. They will only have a huge nest of wires coming out. They also come in different ratings, from bronze, which is the average, all the way up to the highest, which is titanium. What that pretty much means is everything in between, the higher it goes, then the better power efficiency it has. Think of it like a Corvette, bronze, to a Prius, titanium. That's essentially how it manages power. The better it is at managing power, the higher the rating it gets. Okay, now this mess in front of you, if you've noticed, is pretty much just the other components. The other components pretty much consist of everything else that the computer is going to at some point need. We have right here, this is a hard drive, a small little thing right here. This is what's known as a solid state drive. Think of it like the flash drive or the thumbstick that you have in your pocket. It's essentially that, very fast, very efficient on holding things. And what I'm personally using it as for is my boot drive and main programs. Holds my operating system, so it loads up very fast. So instead of taking 5 minutes to load, it only takes about 45 seconds. This here is what's known as a mechanical drive, or HDD. It is a hard disk drive. This has inside of it metal discs spinning with a little magnetic strip, and the magnetic discs spin. This right here is the DVD player CD drive. The next thing on our list is, if you notice here, I have a regular case fan. The next thing on our list is cables. Lots and lots of cables. Cables are very important because, well, you need to get the data to what needs to go to it. You need to get the power, what goes to what. So those are very important. That's where the modular, semi-modular, and regular power supplies come into play. This big monstrous thing here is my CPU cooler. The reason why I have such a big one is because it is important to keep your CPU cold. The colder the processor runs, the better it's going to run, the more efficient it's going to run, and of course, the smoother everything's going to be. For gaming, that is extremely important. Okay, back to the case. So, now we have the case laying on its side. Now, if you notice right here, very small, they have these things, and these are called motherboard standoffs. They are very important. The last thing you want to do is to have your motherboard resting right on this metal plate. And that will pretty much cause an instant short, and you are going to be out of a very nice motherboard. So, make sure you have these standoffs. These come with every single motherboard. They are very important to install. Do not forget to do so. Now, what you want to do is you want to line up the holes with the standoffs. These pretty much will allow you to then essentially bolt it straight into the computer. You want to make sure that you follow the directions that your user guide and user manual comes with when you do get the motherboard. It will help decide exactly where the motherboard needs to rest. Okay, now with our motherboard finally installed and screwed down, now the next part that we're going to be doing is we're going to be seating the processor. There is a small little gold triangle on the processor, and there's a small little gold triangle that's going to be on the motherboard. You line both of them up. It sits in nice and easy. The next thing you want to do is, if you look right here, there is this little lever. This is called the retention arm. This essentially pushes everything down, and you should hear it lock and click right into place. That means that the processor is seated properly, and that means you're not going to have to worry about anything coming loose or having a false connection. The next thing that we're going to be installing is the power supply. We want to always get the motherboard in first, because the motherboard is what pretty much sits behind everything. We're starting with the power supply next because that is the biggest thing to go in, but actually probably one of the easiest to go in. So let's begin the installation. The actual installation of the power supply is only held on by 4 screws, which there's one on that corner, one there, and of course where my hand is. I will be right back after I have this baby installed. And back. So with the power supply fully seated, it's not going to wiggle, not going to move. It's going to stay stationary, which is exactly what we want. The next 2 things we're going to be installing is the rear-facing fan and CPU cooler. So let me get those 2 installed, and then we will go to the CPU. Alright, now with both fans installed, we are ready to get into the next step. The next step is attaching the bottom end of the CPU cooler to the CPU. Now there are 2 methods. Both of them are pretty much the same. One is called the rice method, and the other one is the line method. As they imply, you are essentially making either a rice-sized grain of thermal paste on the processor, or you're making a line. I'm going to be demonstrating the rice method, and you essentially just take the thermal paste and you stick it right on the center of the processor. Start a little bit off to the right and you travel across. When the pressure actually comes down, it will squish it off to the sides, and that will enable a good, clean fit. Now with that installed, only finger tight. You don't want to push it down too hard to where you can actually crack the motherboard. But with those now on, we don't have to worry about the CPU, and we can move on to the next part of the build. Okay, next step is RAM. The RAM is very, very easy. If you notice, on one side of the RAM, you'll notice that is much longer than the other. That corresponds to exactly how you're supposed to plug it in. If you notice, this side right here is shorter than this side. Essentially all you do is stick it in, pretty much line it up with the grooves, and press down on one side. So it seats nice. When you push down, you should hear a nice satisfying click. When you hear that click, that means the RAM is seated. And you go to the next one. If you're only using 2 sticks of RAM, make sure you're using the same color. On to the video card. The video card is pretty much the exact same process of installing the RAM. If you notice, there is a little slot. You notice right down here there's a nice little groove which helps kind of seat everything in. What you want to do is you want to find the corresponding PCI Express lane, which for me is right here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put this in and come right back and show you what's going on. And with the graphics card in, that almost completes the build. The only thing that we have left is we have the front-mounted DVD CD drive, and we also have both of the hard drives. I'm going to install both of them, and then we get to the fun part, wiring. Okay, and we are getting very, very close to the end. The last main parts are going to be wiring. Pretty much the wiring is reading the manual now at this point. Everything at some point on the computer is going to need some form of power or a connection, either for data transfer or for power, sometimes even both, in the case of the hard drives. The final installment of the video. The case is now 100% put together, cables managed, parts put in, everything is good to go, plugged in. The moment of truth. power. Should have a BIOS pop up. There it is. Beautiful Windows 10 operating system. Login screen. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and the best of luck to your PC building future.